And it's unlikely that Alberta will experience scarcity. I mean, because you've got the supply close at hand. But there is, even on the matter of scarcity, there is a little bit of a quirk. And that is that the US government has already passed legislation, not yet implemented, to say that it will not use oil from the oil sands for federal purposes in the US. The California government has already passed legislation, not implemented, saying no oil from oil sands may be used in California. And if that practice expands, then oil sands oil is not going to be allowed into the US. But Canada is required to continue exporting to the US the amount that it has exported for the last 3 years under NAFTA. So Canada may have to export the wrong stuff, so to speak, which may mean that you finish up with local shortages here. It's a bit of a convoluted argument, but I wouldn't put it past the lawyers to figure out that the answer to the problem is to close the gas pumps in northern Alberta. You think NAFTA is a problem? He thinks NAFTA is a problem, but it's a mysterious thing, this whole what's called energy proportionality arrangement. High prices are the more likely thing that Albertans will have to contend with. And Scott McKean is completely wrong, in my view, to think that Albertans will ever be protected from high prices. To protect Albertans from high prices means that what you have to do is to subsidize gasoline and diesel fuel at the pump. And I can't imagine a government that is less likely to do that than the government of Alberta. And then there is the issue of NAFTA again. Without going into the details, if you do subsidize gasoline at the pump and diesel fuel at the pump in Alberta, and consumption goes up in Alberta as a result of that subsidization, NAFTA will require you to introduce rationing. That is what NAFTA says. I mean, we can get out of NAFTA, but that's what NAFTA says. So you've got two problems, and if you had the subsidy without the rationing, you would be losing not only the cost of the subsidy from taxes, but you'd be losing the revenue from the oil that otherwise would be going. And it's hard to imagine the Alberta government subsidizing oil, and it's even harder to imagine it introducing rationing so the good people of the United States can continue to drive. We are into a very messy situation here, and the only reasonable resolution of this is that Alberta will remain part of the world. That Alberta will have world oil prices, attenuated by maybe a little less taxation, but certainly no subsidy, and certainly no exemption from this kind of escalation. So whether you are trying to figure out whether it's better to have diesel buses or trolley buses, or try to figure out what size car to buy, or try to figure out anything to do with oil, you have to consider this prospect, that in 2002 it was $18.30, and now it is $135. That's the barrel of oil, and it's likely to go up. And it's no good doing your calculations based on $50 a barrel oil, because they are not going to be relevant. They will distort the answer. They will distort what you do. So, what I would suggest is, instead of fantasizing about low oil prices again, make Alberta a world leader in adapting to oil depletion. Other places are attempting to do this. Places as unlikely as Abu Dhabi and Dubai in the Middle East, and equally unlikely as Texas. The Texas Transportation Department just last year commissioned a study on how Texas, this is the Roads and Highways Department, you know, those guys in Texas, on how this kind of thing can come into, this kind of Jetsons stuff can come into effect in Texas. And there's the result of that work is on the web if you want to see it. So that, in my view, should be Alberta's strategy, and as part of that, what I'm going to propose to the Council tomorrow is not simply that the present trolley buses not be replaced, but that Edmonton, as part of joining the future, have an aggressive program to replace much of the diesel routes with trolley buses. Maybe not all of them, maybe it wouldn't make sense to do all of them, and I don't know exactly how many it would make to make sense, but looking at the frequency of the buses today, it would seem that there are many routes, particularly those that go through the downtown, that could be justified as due for electrification. And this is all part of preparing for oil depletion. A soft landing is possible. I did a report for the city of Hamilton. I was helped by one of your person who is now a planner in the city of Edmonton. I saw her today, on how the city of Hamilton could do this. There's a lot of stuff in our book about doing this. The Hamilton report done in 2006 also emphasized the huge economic development opportunities that would come to a city that took this course of action. Try to analyze why people don't act. It seems obvious to me. The key is to engage in energy-first planning, to put energy right front and center in everything a municipality or a business or a provincial government or whatever does. Set energy targets, set activity targets in transport activity. In our book, for example, we said in the United States, we are not, when we build our scenario for 2025, we are not going to reduce the amount of transport activity. That would be too painful for Americans. Let's devise a way of keeping the amount of transport activity, but switching a big chunk of it to electricity. And that's what we did. Another stage is stop digging. If you want to get out of a hole, stop digging. What does that mean here? Well, for the United States, what we said is digging means building more highways and building more airports. And we analyzed the budget of governments in the US and concluded that of the money spent on transportation, roughly 1/3 of it was for new stuff and 2/3 of it was for maintaining stuff. And we said, okay, keep the maintaining stuff, but take the new stuff and the new money and stop building more highways and stop building more airports, which is 1/3 of the money, and put it into primarily electrifying and double tracking the very extensive rail system. And that was part of our strategy. So they want to get out of a hole. If they do, they seem to do now, stop digging and work on climbing out. And in this case, stop building highways and airports. Repeat, if there's no preparation, there could be a very hard landing. And it will affect everybody, either directly because you will depend on your car and you won't be able to afford to drive it, or you won't have the oil to drive it, or indirectly because of economic collapse, and even worse things have been talked about, which we don't dwell on in the book, but we try and be optimistic and say there are solutions. But people have noted that the main reason why the planet has been able to support 6.5 billion people